And welcome back to Chicago Bulls Insider. Today, we are looking at a second round sleeper at the center position that the Chicago Bulls should be interested in this upcoming NBA draft. And so before we go ahead and we jump into it, I first want to remind you to slam dunk on that subscribe button. Just like Modest Mazelis, slam dunks in games. And so in exchange for slamming on that subscribe button, I'm going to give you nothing but daily content around the Chicago Bulls. So make sure that you hit that like, you hit that subscribe, and you join the Chicago Bulls Insider family as we talk nothing but Chicago Bulls basketball. And so with that being said, let's go ahead and let's jump into it as we are talking about Yanic Konan Niederhauser out of Penn State. And so if you're not familiar with him, man, there is a lot to like about him. And so he is 7 foot 250. He just finished his junior year with Penn State. He's got a 7 foot 3 wingspan. He has a ton of potential as a rim protector and also too as a lob threat. And so let's go ahead and let's jump into the numbers before we jump into the pros and the cons here for Yanic Konan Niederhauser. And so here we go with the numbers. And so you will see a player that started off at Northern Illinois, and you will see a player that got steadily better as his time went along in college. And so this last season with Penn State, he finished with 12.9 points per game, 0.7 with the steals, 0.8 with the assist. He had 1.7 with the turnovers, 2.3 with the blocks, 6.3 in rebounds, 66.4% from the free throw line. He shot just 9.1% from the three-point line, and then he shot 61.1% from the field. So looking at his numbers, you could see a player that definitely went up as far as the categories were concerned. And so you see that the block shots went up from a season ago. He was at 2.1 the season before, and then his rebounds went from 4.4 rebounds up to 6.3. So that's great to see. And then when you look at the field goal percentage, he went to 61.1%. And he was at 54.1% the season ago. So you love to see that. Now, what makes him interesting as far as the numbers, when you take a look at this, you can see that his free throw percentage was not good last season, but in his career, he's shown that he shot 80% from the free throw line. And so that just shows you that the potential is there. And also what I found interesting is this: his three-point percentage only at 9.1% this last season. However, he has already shot 29.2% in his career. And so that really suggests that there is definitely some potential for him to be a player that could possibly stretch the floor. And I say that because Asa Newell, he just shot 29.2% from the three-point line. And I've said this before, like his shot looks very good with the mechanics and things like that. And so I think, when you're looking here at Yanic, I think that you're looking at a player that for sure he's showing you right now that if you put in the coaching as far as, developing and things like that, that he could really surprise you at the next level there in those shooting percentages and things like that. And so next, when you start to look at the pros of him, I think that there's a ton to like about him. And so when you go and you take a look at the highlights, I think you're going to see a player that first and foremost, I think he plays with a high motor and he has an edge about him. Like I think that he has a swagger. He has the edge. He plays with the juice. And so I love that, especially when you're talking about for the Chicago Bulls. I think that no matter what happens in the NBA draft or the players that they bring in via free agency, at some point, I just feel like the mentality of this team is going to have to change. I feel like that the culture of this team is going to have to change in the sense that you want players out there that are just wanting to win basketball games. And so I think when you look at Yanic, you look at just his highlights and things like that, you see a player that plays with a high motor. So I love that. And next, going back to that point that I was talking about with his three-point percentage and his free throw percentage, where he's shown that there is, the potential for him. One of the things that is talked about on NBADraft.net is that he's very coachable. So I love that aspect. And so you're getting a player that certainly is coming in raw. You're getting a player that hasn't shown you consistency as far as shooting the basketball, but I love the fact that he's coachable. And so because of that, I think that that is another plus. And so next with him, look, he's terrific as far as being a good roller. I thought that every time that you saw him in his highlights and things like that, he moves his feet well off of the screen. He understands when to disengage off of that screen and start to roll to the basket. So that was great to see with his awareness there. He has terrific hands as far as making catches. Like there were some times where players were throwing it up high to the ceiling and he would catch that and he would be able to gather himself and go up. So he shows good balance there. And also, too, when he's on that pick and roll, I thought he was terrific at making the catch and then going to attack mode. So I love that about him. So great hands, and he is terrific off of the screen roll game. And so next with him, I thought that he had a pretty good spin move as well. And so I know that, look, he's a bit turnover prone, which we're going to talk about that as far as the weaknesses. But man, when he got it to click, it looks special because when he puts the ball on the deck and then he goes to that spin move, he uses his size to get to the rim. I thought that he was terrific there. And speaking of using his size, I think that he's terrific as far as going through contact. You're going to see that when he's finishing on these lob plays, and you're also going to see that he does not shy away from the contact. I love the fact that he wants all of that smoke at the rim. And so this is why I like him as far as the motor and everything else is concerned, the way that he will play through contact. And then as far as being a lob threat, I loved watching his lobs. Like his lobs remind me definitely of the player that I'm going to compare him to. And so that is something that I can definitely see that would translate with the Chicago Bulls. You're looking at a player that would be an excellent lob threat player and a finisher there. And so next, when you look at his defense, I thought that his defense, to me, he shows some signs. And so defensively, I liked how he made his rotations. And so sometimes you would see that he has to go out and then he maybe has the hedge out at the top of the key and then get back into the paint and then find the ball and then make the right play. And so there were several times that he would get back, get into a weak side situation, and he would get a block shot. And so that is point number one. I like that he had some awareness there defensively to do that as far as showing and getting back. Next with him, I think that the shot blocking ability is definitely there. I think that he does a great job as far as using his length and not necessarily fouling like that. Like I think that he knows how to use his physicality and get that player to go into his length. And then he has some very good timing because that's what you have to have as a shot blocker. So I did see that as well. And I think that the next thing that I liked about him as a big man, he's pretty fluid. I think that he's not the fastest out there, but he definitely can move his feet and he can slide his feet. Now, does he have to get much better? Absolutely. But you're working with a pretty solid baseline with Yanic. I think that he's going to be just fine coming into the league. I think working on the speed aspect, that's just a matter of, getting out there, working with the speed ladder, getting, comfortable as far as, taking quicker steps and things like that. Coming from a runner standpoint here, I think is something that he can absolutely work at to be much better as far as being a lot more switchable at that position. But as far as being fluid, it's there. And so the next thing with him, when you start to look at the weaknesses with him, and so I think that the first thing that I want to talk about is the turnovers, because he's definitely a guy that did turn the basketball over. I talked about this initially with his numbers at 1.7. You can also see that when we go back to his numbers, that is something that did go up as his time did go along in college. And so he is not a very good passer out of the post. And so if you're looking for him to be a playmaker, then he just doesn't have that. And so you're hoping that he does grow into that, but he's not very good right now with that. And so the next thing with him, I just talked about it. He needs to get a lot quicker because you need him to be able to switch out on guards and things like that. You don't want him to just be in situations where he's relying a lot on drop coverages and things like that. I do think that he has the ability to go out and guard a mobile center. But again, he's just not got a whole bunch of foot speed. And so, that player that he's guarding might be able to hit him with a good little cross or something and get by him. But that comes down to just getting a much quicker and also getting comfortable in your balance out there when you're going out to guard a perimeter type of big. And so next with him, I think another thing is just scoring outside the paint. And so again, we talked about this with the 3-point shooting. He's shown some flash there, but he did not show anything in this last season at Penn State. And so I think that it's there Does he uncover it at the next level? I think it's something that it would definitely help him out a lot to not only be a lob player like that, but to be able to step out and make players pay for the lack of coverage. I think that that's something that he would have to work on. And so right now, that is something that is a weakness. Next for him, he's going to have to get a little bit bulkier. So you can see right now with his frame and everything like that, it's a bit thin. And so I think that he's going to have to bulk up a little bit, especially to take the impact and the power that he's going to face with some of these NBA centers and things like that. Another thing that was mentioned in NBADraft.net as far as his profile is that he's an older prospect. He's 22, and it took him to 22 to where he really took off, because you see, once again, as we bring up the numbers, that at this point he's a junior and that's his best season thus far. And so you wonder with an older prospect, has he tapped out with his potential? And so I'm not willing to say that that's necessarily the case. And I will say this, for a second round pick, I'm absolutely invested into him, especially when you see things that in his NBA draft net profile that says that he's very coachable. So I'd love to take a chance with him for sure. Now, when you're looking at the player comparisons, the first player that came to mind to me is a young DeAndre Jordan. Like, I see a guy that if you can get him in the building and with that athleticism, I feel like it could be Lob City times 2 here, because this guy can definitely finish at the rim. And so I love that about him. So I'm seeing a young DeAndre Jordan back when it was Lob City with him and Blake Griffin. Another player that he reminds me of would be a Jackson Hayes. I do see the similarities there as far as being a rim runner and a guy that will finish at the rim. And then another comparison that he was given was Daniel Gafford. So you have got to love that he's getting the Daniel Gafford comparison. But once again, these are comparisons, but the one that really stuck out the most for me was the DeAndre Jordan. Like, I definitely see that he can be that type of player with that size and just also to providing rim protection. And I think that you're looking at a player that he could turn into a solid rotational piece. And so I'm not willing to say that Yanic would be a starter for you, but I absolutely think that he would provide definitely some size in the front court. He would provide some nastiness in the front court, and he is going to be a guy that would be a finisher of the break. Now, he's very raw. There's definitely some things that he would have to work on, but I did get a chance to see some of his highlights there at the NBA Draft Combine. And as far as the scrimmages were concerned, like, he looked very good in that. And then I loved his interview too as well. I saw like a brief little 51-second clip there where he was talking about how he had played against Keyshawn George when he was younger. And I think that they played on the national team as well. And so, this is a player that, look, he's seen NBA talent before. And I love the fact that he's grown to the player that he has come to today. And so I think that if you're looking at a second round pick here, I think that he's worth definitely a shot. I don't know if this is a player that the Chicago Bulls would be comfortable with taking at pick number 45. I mean, that could be a bit high, but I will say this, with all this trade down talk and everything else, if the Bulls can somehow find a way to get a second round selection, I would definitely be okay with them taking a chance with Yanic. Or I feel like that he's a player that you would absolutely sign directly after the draft if he's not drafted, if that happens. But again, you guys let me know in the comments what you guys are thinking, because I think that he could be a second round sleeper that the Chicago Bulls should target here in the second round. And so you guys let me know what you guys are thinking here about Niederhauser out of Penn State, if the Chicago Bulls should in fact look to take him in the second round. So I'd love to hear what your thoughts are. And as we always say, go Bulls, and I will see you guys on the next one. All right, peace.